Get a cup, get a cup, get a cup. Hello. Welcome back, everyone, to another video on Fresh Cut Slim. And today we're going to be looking at people can't afford to retire, millions are doing it anyway, by how money works. Now, I like this channel, and I also like these kinds of videos, which I find them to be quite interesting. So, yeah, I'm going to be reacting to this today. Hopefully, you guys like it. Without any further ado, let's begin.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but everybody is getting old.
Chocolate.
This year, a record number of people will be turning 65, and the next year, that record will be broken again. We have
What, with everyone turning 66?
been warned about aging populations for decades now, and now it's actually happening. Unfortunately, the savings retirement gap for
It's because people aren't having as many kids. Like, people are just going to get old regardless, right? I mean, duh. But it's a fact when they didn't have as many kids to replace them, that's when it's more of a concern. Because if you have, say, 100 million people turning old, and those people have not had an equivalent of amount of kids to replace them, that means that the population is going to end up shrinking, which, you know, some people will say that's a good thing, that we're overpopulated, whatever. But ultimately, if you aren't able to replace a population, and even not even to grow it, but just to maintain that level, then everything's going to start shrinking. The economy's going to start shrinking. Like, it's going to end up causing a lot of problems.
For millions of households is wider than it has ever been, and people's assets have been eaten up by inflation, bad investments, and good old-fashioned financial illiteracy. Over 20% of the people on the cusp of retirement have no savings at all.
What? No savings? You've had 60 friggin' something years, and you just haven't managed to save anything or to invest properly? See, this is financial literacy, and being able to just not be stupid with money should be taught in schools. The education system has failed a lot of people.
But that isn't stopping them. Millions of people across the world can't afford to retire, and they're doing it anyway. So what the f does this mean for everybody else?
And how? How are they retiring without anything to retire on? Sure, if you have $100,000, that's not enough to retire, but if you have that in, say, USD, and you go to move to a country that is like, I don't know, say with pesos, you know, stuff like that. If you move to another country, you could live probably off of that, probably for the rest of your life. Or if you take that amount of money and you invest it, that could probably generate you enough money to live in, say, a third world country for the rest of your life, all right. Like, that's probably the only way you could retire if you don't have that much.
Baby boomers leaving their homes either because they're moving to assisted living centers or they're just no longer living.
In the last 10 years, Milwaukee County saw a 22% increase of older residents.
Those in their 50s are generally at peak earning potential, yet more than half worry they'll run out of money in retirement.
Is this the retirement that you imagined?
No.
Well, that's no ordinary rabbit.
Cut it out, add.
Foul, cruel, and bad-tempered rodent you ever set eyes on.
Earlier this year, the Retirement Income Institute released a commission study on retirement savings. And I can't overemphasize how much I love the name of this report, Peak Boomers Impact Study,
Peak Boomers Impact
found that between this year and 2030, 30 million Americans will retire, representing almost a fifth of the total labor force. The study focused primarily
I mean, I guess that means a lot of jobs will be opening up. However, how many will be taken over by AI? I don't know.
on how those retirees plan to fund their retirement. And the results were grim. More than half of the study group had less than $250,000 in assets, including their home if they had one.
That's not a lot. Like, I don't think you can retire on that. Here, let me get the old calculator out. Get the old calculator out. Here we go. 250 grand. That sounds like a lot, but when you're that age, like, let's say you're making 50 grand a year, you know, that's only 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 years that this could last you. So unless you plan to live to your 70, you know, if you're 65 retiring and you plan to live to your 70, this will last you. But anything over that, then you're in trouble. Even if you were to invest this, like if you have to sell your house and this is, you know, at the end you have this much cash, if you're investing that and you're only getting, if you get 7%, which is more of a high, that would only give you $17,000 or $17,500 a year to live off of. So if this is invested and you managed to get 7%, that's only 17 grand a year. I'm not sure what the poverty line is, but that's got to be close.
And that group would rely on Social Security as their primary or exclusive source of income in retirement. Now, this study was conducted by independent researchers, but it was funded by a group that wants to sell annuities to people planning their retirement. So some of their recommendations need to be taken with more than a bucket of salt.
Yeah, they're trying to sell you crap.
However, the study group of retirees getting too old to work are just one part of the larger group deciding that right now is a pretty good time to retire. A study by Pew Research has found that the largest wave of retirement has already happened, as people step back from the workforce during COVID, assisted by a combination of record low interest rates, generous stimulus measures, redundancy packages, record asset prices, and a general motivation to not go back into a plague-infested office. This is far from a uniquely American trend. In fact, we are actually behind a lot of countries that are both older than us and have better support systems for people in their old age. On top of hitting peak boomer, there are less typical retirees. A growing number of independently wealthy young people who are pursuing financial independence where investment returns from their assets are enough to fund their lifestyle indefinitely, and on the other end of the spectrum, there are people just giving up on working and are scraping by on family support, government assistance, or jobs in the informal economy.
I think if you give up working to rely on family support, then you are a leech to society, especially if you have the ability to work. And you're not like you don't have some kind of disability. If you can, and you're deciding to leech off of family members, that is a scummy move, right? Like, that's just, because then you're putting the burden on them, so they have to work more to support you. Like, how's that fair to them?
These people aren't the typical demographic of retirees, but they are still adding to the record trend, and they are all paying for this major financial decision in slightly different ways. The first way is that they just aren't. People don't always make entirely rational financial decisions. Whether it's buying a car in an 84-month finance deal, racking up credit card debt to buy luxury goods, or just not understanding the importance of saving and investing, there is no shortage of people doing really dumb things with their money.
This is so true. I know people like this, and it drives me crazy because I've tried to help them. I've tried to help them with just the basics, and they just keep making bad decisions. Like, it has to be taught when they're young. Because when you're older, you're set in your ways, and it's a lot harder to learn unless you go really out of your way to learn to improve yourself. Like, if you're the kind of person who does that, you're probably going to be fine anyway. You know, I know people who buy a car, and then 2 years later you'll get another car, but you still haven't paid off. You still haven't paid off the first car that you got. I know someone who's done this like 3 times. They have like $90,000 worth of debt. Of cars, and the vehicle they're driving now, the amount of miles that they're putting on it is insane. Their vehicle will have been broken down and put into a dump before their loan has been paid off, essentially. Like, it just keeps happening and happening. I don't know how that they keep qualifying for a loan, because they shouldn't. They don't even pay their credit cards. So I don't know how they qualify for a loan, but they still manage to get away with it. But like, it needs to be taught in school.
You are watching a channel that gives weekly depressing lectures on the state of the financial system, business trends, and the economy. So all of you are probably far more financially literate than the average person. And even then, you have probably made some dumb money mistakes. People deciding to quit their jobs often aren't thinking entirely rationally. And more people are just deciding that if they are going to be screwed financially in their old age, they would at least like to enjoy a few years while they still have their health and worry about finances once they are too old for it to be their problem. For some people, the decision is made for them. Layoffs nationwide have hit people approaching retirement age particularly hard. According to a survey conducted by the Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies, most Americans are retiring 5 years earlier than they expected. While this sounds like it's giving people more years to enjoy themselves, the reality is that it's giving people fewer years to save and more years to cover. And this is almost entirely involuntary.
Yeah. By the sounds of it, if you only have $250,000, like, that still sounds like a lot of money, but for retirement, it's not. You need at least $1 million. I'd say at least $1 million to scrape by, like, to do okay. Because if you're getting 7%, that's 70 grand a year that you might be able to get from that, which is okay. But I mean, depending where you live, that can really, still not enough. So, like, $1 million, I think, is a bare minimum just to get by.
According to a study published by ProPublica, since 2016, 56% of workers over the age of 50 lost their job involuntarily, meaning they either got fired, made redundant, or laid off. Now, that might not sound too bad.
56? That's a high rate of people just getting fired at, once you're over 50. This is why you can't be reliant on companies' pensions or those kind of things to support you. Because you could be there for 30 years and get laid off, 5 years before your retirement, and then you might not even get your pension. You have to be self-reliant. Don't rely on these other companies or people to support you, because ultimately it comes down to you.
But you have to remember that a lot of people over the age of 50 are choosing to leave their job because they are retiring on their own terms. So the majority being let go is pushing a lot of people out of work. Once they are out, older people are finding it much harder to find a job, especially ones that pay as well as the jobs they were laid off from. Companies don't want to hire older people because they think that they can't use computers, they aren't going to be able to do physical work for as long as young workers in non-office jobs, and there is the not-so-secret reality that older workers are normally less easy to take advantage of than younger workers with their whole career ahead of them.
I would say that's actually all true, especially for like technology stuff. You know, unless you've been working in the technology field your whole life and you've been evolving and adapting with technology, then if you're coming into it at an older age, it's like even just watching my parents do it, it freaking hurts. It hurts watching them operate computers because of how just unaware to how to use them they are. My parents aren't even that old, but you know, if you weren't literate in technology and how to operate computers, then it makes sense why a company wouldn't want to hire you to be on a computer, because you're not going to know how to use it, or you're going to be very slow. That just makes sense.
It's technically not legal to discriminate against workers over the age of 40, although this law does not protect against discriminating against people under the age of 40.
You can discriminate against people over the age of 40? What? Sorry, so you're 41. Get out of here.
But that's a whole separate issue. It doesn't matter anyway, because any half-competent hiring manager or human resources department could find a reason for hiring a young worker instead of an over 50 worker, and this all means the same thing. If people lose their jobs over the age of 50, they are almost forced into retirement whether they can afford it or not.
Because they're not going to be able to get a job, or at least one that pays what they want.
So it's time to learn how money works to find out what this means for everybody else supporting a growing group of people who can't support themselves.
Grandpa brought out his magic wands. What kind of party are they throwing?
The topic of what to do with aging populations in countries across the world is something that is keeping a lot of policymakers up at night. People are living longer and having fewer children, which means more pressure is going to be put on a smaller group of young people, or elderly people are going to have to make do with less. Of course, a lot of baby boomers are independently very wealthy, as they have enjoyed a high level of job security and incredible asset price appreciation over their working careers.
Yeah, I freaking hear kids screaming outside. What's going on? I was gonna say, yeah, like the asset appreciation, such as the stock market, it has gone up so high, like especially since the great financial crisis, where they've just been pumping money and making it easy money, that it's gone insane. So it would make sense how a decent portion of, say, baby boomers or these older people should have enough money because of how high asset prices have gotten.
A typical white-haired couple driving a gold buggy around a gated Floridian retirement village might be the first thing you think of when you think of boomer retirees. But these people are far from the average. People of retirement age own more than half of the wealth of the country. But that wealth is spread even more unevenly than it is over the general population. There are some extremely wealthy baby boomers, a small group of boomers who will be able to comfortably fund a nice retirement.
You also have the richest people in the world, who for the most part are all, older. Warren Buffett's like 90-something. Bill Gates, I think, is in the 70s. Every billionaire, I don't know how old Elon is. I think he's like in his 50s, but which I guess is still technically, he might even fall into this category. But all these billionaires are in the age group that's probably going to skew the results here, I think. Because if it's just age versus age, all of a sudden you have all these billionaires in the highest, which are the wealthiest people in the world, up in the higher age brackets. I would assume that would skew the results.
And millions who are fighting for what little is left. The question is really about what happens when this group just can't work anymore. A study by the Stanford Center on Longevity found that even though baby boomers are the wealthiest generation in history as a whole, they are still facing tougher retirement conditions on an individual basis than their parents did. Some countries are pushing back retirement ages to squeeze a few more years of work out of people before they can receive a government pension or access their Advantage retirement savings accounts. So
this is why you have to be self-reliant and not reliant on the government for things, because they'll do that kind of stuff to you. They'll push it forward. So then, like, 1 more year and I can retire. 1 more year and I can retire. Ding, 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 ding. Oops, 5 more years. Oops, 10 more years, and then you can retire. And then, oops, they have to cut the Social Security amount because they can't afford the interest on the amount of government debt that they have because they spend like drunken pirates. No, you see, what you need to be doing is you need to be self-reliant. You need to be putting that money aside on your own so that you can access it whenever you want. In my opinion, it's better to be in control of your finances than to be reliant on the system.
Statistically, most of you watching this video are either at the peak of your career or are only just starting, which is why we have covered the problems you are likely to face if you don't already have a solid plan to retire. But even if pushing back retirement benefits is a necessary evil, it's going to be a hard sell. Retiring baby boomers are a large group, and they vote. The very mention of them needing to work a few more years is borderline political suicide. Most plans here in America center around pushing back retirement for young people who aren't close enough to retirement yet to care. Whatever the plan is, it's not being helped by the millions of people who are dropping out of the workforce. So, the compromise is that the payments are stretched thinner. According to Census Bureau data, poverty rates amongst people over 65 has been on the rise as government programs haven't been able to keep up with general inflation, and certainly haven't kept up with the spiraling costs for aged healthcare and senior living.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And even if you look at, I made a video about this, or I talked about this, I don't know when, it was a couple months ago, I think. The amount of money that the US is spending on just like the debt load that it has, it's like this year is to be over $1 trillion of interest that it's paying. Where's it going to get that money from? It doesn't have it. What the US has to do is sell treasuries, which increases the debt even further, which is like it's a circle. That's a loop. That's gonna end horribly. Or they have to cut back spending on other areas, such as military, social security, and whatnot.
People do re-enter the workforce, it's normally into low-wage jobs that only help support other payments. A study conducted by the American Society of Aging found that a fifth of older workers were making less than $15 an hour, and that included people between 55 and 65 who should be at the penultimate years of their career. The authors of this study also pointed out that a lot of this low-wage work is intense, routine, and almost always highly monitored in situations where a person controls neither the pace nor content of their work.
Shampoo. Cut it out. Add. Shampoo. Look like us with our brand new shampoo.
Now, you probably don't need an institutional study to tell you that minimum wage jobs are hard. But they are even harder on old people with deteriorating health, which means it could be hard for them to keep this work even if they really need it. When this happens, the last line of support becomes relying on their adult children for care.
And when they aren't having, enough kids to replace them, then they don't really have anyone to rely on in that, in this case.
Now, the idea of your parents moving back in with you might be terrifying enough.
But that's typical. Right? Like all throughout history, this is how it would happen. There wasn't Social Security 250 years ago or whatever, right? This is exactly the stuff that would happen, is that your parents would move back in with you and then you would have to support them. That is exactly how it used to be.
But the burden of being a caregiver to elderly parents is disproportionately falling on lower income households. Lower income households are less likely to be able to save adequately for retirement and are more likely to have children that are also low income. When those parents start requiring care from their children, it can impact relationships, career growth, or even how many hours the adult child can put into their work. Additionally, a dependent parent might be a direct financial burden if their assistance payments don't cover their expenses. This means the children are going to be less likely to save for their own retirement
because they're spending money on their parents,
creating a vicious intergenerational cycle. So what was supposed to be a feel-good story about millions of people leaving behind the 9-to-5 has turned into a lecture about the grim financial landscape that millions of people are forced to contend with. Welcome to this channel. By now, you should know what you have signed up for. But what could be...
I don't think that it's hopeless, right? And you have to be aware that whatever is going on in other people's lives is not really your problem or business. And yeah, it may suck what's going on, but you can't fix everyone else's problem, right? Worry about your own situation. If you have extra savings every month, invest it into something that's going to grow in the future and just don't touch it. So you have to learn to become self-reliant and to make every single dollar that you have work for you. Don't be reliant on the government to support you, because oftentimes it'll let you down.
Be done about this. As a society, not much, unfortunately. A lot of incredibly smart people are tackling the problem of aging populations, and the solutions so far have been to get people to work longer and live on less. Individually, though, you need to assume that there is not going to be anything there to support you when you are too old to work.
Exactly. You have to be responsible for yourself. You cannot fix all of society's problems, and it's silly worrying about all that, but you have control over your own life, and that's where you have the ability to make proper decisions to help you down the road.
Pensions are already strained, and if you have a few decades left in the workforce, there really is no guarantee it will exist at all for you.
I don't think it will. I think, as I was saying, with the amount of money that the U.S. has to pay for interest on the debt, over $1 trillion this year, and it's going to get worse. It's going to get so much worse. I think they're going to have to cut Social Security even more. The military budget, I mean, it's probably too inflated as it is, in my opinion. But regardless, they can cut all these different areas. They're not going to be able to afford it. They're not going to be able to afford the interest on the debt that they keep bringing into existence.
And if it does, it's probably only going to be enough to cover the bare necessities, if that. So try to set something aside in a 401k or whatever the equivalent is in your respective countries. It's basic.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I'm not sure what age you can touch a 401k at, but, you know, if it does give you tax benefits to put money in there and it gets taken off of your taxes, I would say that's probably a good idea to be putting money in there. You got to think of these things now before you're faced with retirement and then being like, oops, I only have, you know, this much money and I can't retire.
Stuff. But when so many people cannot or will not do the basics, it could put you a long way ahead. Now, this only applies to elderly retirees. This problem is being made much worse by the millions of people leaving the workforce decades before they would normally retire. Go and watch my video on why millions of men are simply choosing not to work and how they are surviving without even any of the supports available to regular retirees.
Maybe I'll react to that one next. That sounds interesting. Anyway, I hope you guys liked this video. This was very fascinating. I really liked it. Hope you guys did too. Hopefully it wasn't too grim. You know, if you can learn anything from this, I would say you got to learn to be self-reliant and don't rely on other people or governments to get you through, because in the end, I would not put my trust in the government to support you in old age. It's up to you to make the right moves for your own, you know, life. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. And yeah, with that being said, the original link's in the description. Make sure you go subscribe to How Money Works if you like this. If you're new, subscribe. See you guys next time.